Most people begin a new year by asking the wrong question. They ask, what should I do this year? What goals should I chase? What habits should I build? What skills should I learn? And on the surface, those sound like smart questions. They feel productive. They feel responsible. But they miss the most important point, because action without meaning is just movement, and movement without direction eventually leads to exhaustion. The real question, the one that changes everything, is not what you will do, but why this year matters in the first place. When you start with why, everything else falls into place. The why is the reason you wake up early when no one is watching. It's the reason you keep going when motivation fades, because motivation always fades. That's not a failure. That's human nature. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are temporary. If your plan for 2026 depends on always feeling inspired, you've already lost. But when your actions are connected to a reason that is bigger than a mood, discipline becomes natural. You don't need to be pushed. You don't need to be reminded. You move because not moving would feel like a betrayal of who you are becoming. The problem is that most people never define their why. They borrow goals from society, from social media, from family expectations. They chase numbers, titles, and approval without ever asking if those things actually matter to them. And when the results don't come fast enough, they quit. Not because they are lazy, but because the goal never belonged to them in the first place. A goal without a why is fragile. The first obstacle shatters it. When you know why this year matters, pain starts to make sense. Sacrifice stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like an investment. Early mornings, late nights, uncomfortable conversations, none of these disappear. But they change meaning. They become proof that you are aligned with something that matters. That's the difference between people who burn out and people who build momentum. One is chasing outcomes. The other is honoring purpose. Your why doesn't have to be poetic, doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to be true. Maybe this year matters because you're tired of breaking promises to yourself. Maybe it matters because you want your children to see consistency instead of excuses. Maybe it matters because you've been surviving for years and you're finally ready to live intentionally. Whatever it is, clarity beats complexity every time. A simple why, clearly defined, will outperform 1,000 complicated plans. When you start with why, discipline stops being about willpower. Willpower is limited. It runs out when you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed. Purpose doesn't run out. Purpose pulls you forward even when energy is low. That's why some people seem unstoppable, not because they are stronger than you, but because they are clearer than you. They know what they are protecting. They know what they are building. And clarity is fuel. A strong why also protects you from distraction. In a world designed to steal your attention, focus becomes a competitive advantage. Every opportunity looks attractive when you don't know your direction. Every distraction feels urgent. But when you know why this year matters, decisions get simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You don't ask, is this good? You ask, does this serve my why? And if the answer is no, the decision is already made. This is how leaders think. Not in terms of tasks, but in terms of meaning. They don't wake up asking how to stay busy. They wake up asking how to stay aligned. Because being busy is easy, being intentional is hard, but intentionality compounds. Small actions done for the right reason consistently over time. This is how lives change. Starting with why also changes how you measure success. Instead of chasing validation, you start tracking alignment. Did I act in accordance with what matters today? Did my decisions move me closer to the person I said I want to become? Progress stops being external and starts becoming internal. And when progress is internal, no one can take it away from you. The truth is, 2026 will challenge you. It will test your patience. It will expose your habits. And at some point, you will want to quit. Not because you can't do it, but because it's uncomfortable to grow. When that moment comes, goals won't save you. Motivation won't save you. Only your why will. Only the reason you decided this year matters will keep you in the fight. So before you write a single goal, before you download another planner, before you promise yourself this year will be different, pause. Ask the deeper question. Why does this year matter? What are you no longer willing to tolerate? What are you finally ready to commit to? Because when you start with why, you don't need to chase discipline. Discipline comes looking for you. Most people want the rewards of leadership without accepting the weight of responsibility. They want recognition, influence, and respect, but they hesitate when it's time to say the 3 hardest words a leader can say. This is on me. Because responsibility is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront your decisions, your habits, and the role you play in the outcomes of your life. Yet leadership doesn't begin with a title, a promotion, or authority over others. Leadership begins the moment you stop blaming and start owning. Blame is easy. It gives temporary relief and permanent weakness. When something goes wrong, blame offers an escape hatch. It tells you the problem is external, someone else, the system, the timing, the economy, the circumstances. And sometimes those things are real. Sometimes they are unfair. But the moment you focus on what's outside your control, you surrender the only thing that can actually change your future. Ownership does the opposite. It returns power to you. It says, I may not control everything, but I am responsible for my response. In 2026, the world will not reward excuses. It will reward those who take responsibility early, often, and publicly. Because ownership builds trust. When people know you won't hide when things go wrong, they believe you when things go right. Credit given without responsibility feels hollow. Responsibility taken without credit builds credibility. And credibility is the foundation of real leadership. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything or carrying guilt that isn't yours. It means being honest about your influence. It means asking, what could I have done differently? Instead of, why did this happen to me? That shift in thinking changes everything. One question leads to growth, the other leads to stagnation. Leaders are not defined by their ability to avoid mistakes, but by their willingness to learn from them without defensiveness. Ownership also demands consistency. It's easy to take responsibility when things are small. It's harder when the stakes are high and the spotlight is on. True leaders don't wait for praise to accept accountability. They step forward before they are asked. They don't say, I'll take responsibility, but there is no but. Responsibility taken with conditions is not responsibility. It's negotiation. The moment you say, this is on me, something powerful happens. You regain control of the narrative inside your own mind. Instead of reacting, you begin leading. Instead of explaining, you begin improving. Ownership forces clarity. It exposes gaps in preparation, communication, and execution. And while that exposure can feel uncomfortable, it is the only place where real progress begins. Followers wait for instructions. Leaders take initiative. Followers ask, what should I do now? Leaders ask, what needs to be done? And the difference between those two questions is responsibility. In 2026, this difference will become even more visible. As uncertainty increases, people will look for those who can be trusted to stand firm, admit mistakes, and move forward with integrity. Ownership will separate those who react from those who lead. When you take responsibility before you take credit, you change the culture around you. People feel safer, teams become stronger, conversations become more honest, because responsibility creates psychological safety. When others see you own your mistakes, they feel permission to own theirs. And that environment where truth is valued over image is where excellence grows. Responsibility also reshapes your relationship with failure. Failure stops being an identity and starts being information. Instead of seeing failure as proof that you're not capable, you see it as feedback that you're learning. But this only works if you own the outcome. If you blame the failure, you lose the lesson. Ownership preserves the lesson. And lessons repeated become wisdom. There is a quiet confidence that comes from responsibility. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It shows up in reliability, in follow-through, in the way you handle pressure. People don't trust those who are always right. They trust those who are always accountable, because accountability signals maturity. It says, you can count on me even when it's hard. Taking responsibility also means resisting the temptation to play the victim. Victimhood can be seductive. It gives you sympathy without requiring change, but it also steals your future. Leaders don't deny hardship, but they refuse to live inside it. They acknowledge reality without surrendering agency. They say, this is the situation and this is what I will do next. That mindset transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth. In 2026, ownership will not always be celebrated immediately. Sometimes it will cost you. Sometimes it will mean difficult conversations, uncomfortable truths, and delayed recognition. But over time, it pays dividends that shortcuts never can. Respect earned slowly lasts longer than applause gained quickly. Responsibility also clarifies your standards. When you own outcomes, you raise your expectations of yourself. You prepare more thoroughly. You communicate more clearly. You follow up more consistently because you know there is no one else to hide behind. That pressure, when embraced, sharpens you. It turns potential into performance. Leadership is not about control. It's about care. And care is demonstrated through responsibility. You take responsibility because the outcome matters, because the people involved matter, because your word matters. And in a world where trust is fragile, those who take responsibility become anchors. So as you move through 2026, pay attention to the moments when it would be easier to explain than to own. Those moments are invitations. Invitations to step into leadership. Invitations to separate yourself from the crowd. Every time you choose ownership over excuses, you strengthen the leader you are becoming. Trust is not built in grand moments. It is built quietly over time through repetition. Most people believe trust comes from what you say, your promises, your intentions, your explanations. But words are only introductions. People don't trust words, they trust patterns, they trust what they see again and again. And the pattern you create every day is the story people believe about you. Consistency is what turns intention into identity. Anyone can show up motivated on a good day. Anyone can be kind when things are easy, focused when results are positive, and confident when circumstances are favorable. That doesn't earn trust. Trust is earned when you show up the same way on bad days, when pressure increases, when things don't go your way. When no one is watching, that's when patterns are revealed, and that's when credibility is either built or broken. People are always observing, even when they say nothing. They notice how you respond to stress, how you speak when you're tired, how you act when you don't get credit. These moments matter more than any speech or promise, because consistency answers the question everyone is asking, consciously or not: can I rely on this person? And reliability is the foundation of trust. Inconsistent behavior creates confusion. One day you're supported, the next day distant. One day disciplined, the next day careless. Over time, people stop listening to what you say and start protecting themselves from what you might do. Not because they want to, but because unpredictability feels unsafe. Consistency, on the other hand, creates calm. It tells people what to expect. And when expectations are clear, trust grows. Consistency doesn't mean perfection, it means alignment. It means your actions match your values most of the time, especially when it's inconvenient. People don't expect you to be flawless. They expect you to be dependable. They expect effort. They expect honesty. When you fall short but respond the same way every time with ownership, humility, and correction, you reinforce trust rather than damage it. Credibility is built when your behavior doesn't change based on who's in the room. When your standards remain steady whether you're being praised or criticized. When your commitment doesn't fluctuate with your mood. This kind of consistency takes discipline, not talent. It requires you to decide in advance who you are, so you're not negotiating with yourself in every moment. The reason consistency is so powerful is because it compounds. One action doesn't define you. 100 repeated actions do. Trust is not the result of a single big promise kept, but of many small promises honored, being on time, following through, communicating clearly, showing respect. These things seem small, but together they form a pattern, and patterns are what people remember. When you show up consistently, people begin to relax around you. They don't have to guess your intentions. They don't have to manage your reactions. They know where you stand. That psychological safety is rare, and it's valuable. It's why consistent people are often trusted with more responsibility. Not because they are louder or smarter, but because they are steady. Consistency also protects your own confidence. When your behavior aligns with your standards, you trust yourself more. You don't need external validation to feel secure. You know who you are because you've proven it to yourself repeatedly. That internal trust becomes visible to others. Confidence rooted in consistency is quiet, but it's unmistakable. On bad days, consistency matters even more. Anyone can be disciplined when energy is high. Anyone can be generous when resources are abundant. But when you are tired, discouraged, or frustrated, your true habits surface. This is where most people lose trust without realizing it. Not through dramatic failure, but through subtle inconsistency, a missed commitment, a sharp tone, a decision that contradicts what they say they value. Consistency requires self-awareness. You have to notice your patterns before others do. You have to ask yourself, what do people experience when they experience me? Not what you intend, but what you actually deliver. That question is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because trust is built from the outside in, but it must be protected from the inside out. Being consistent doesn't mean being rigid. It means being reliable in your principles while flexible in your methods. The world changes, circumstances shift. But your core behavior, how you treat people, how you handle pressure, how you respond to mistakes, should remain recognizable. That recognition is what builds credibility. In 2026, people will be drawn to stability. In uncertain times, consistency becomes leadership. When others are reactive, steady behavior stands out. When emotions run high, calm patterns inspire confidence. You don't need to convince anyone you can be trusted. You show them one day at a time. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. But when consistency is present, trust strengthens even through challenges. People forgive mistakes when they see a reliable pattern of integrity. They lose trust when they see a pattern of excuses. Patterns always speak louder than isolated events. So every day, whether it feels important or not, you are casting a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. Each choice reinforces a pattern. Each pattern shapes your reputation. And over time, those patterns become trust. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it by showing up the same way again and again. Short-term wins are tempting because they offer immediate feedback. They make you feel productive, successful, and validated. A quick result triggers a rush of satisfaction, a sense that you're moving forward. And there is nothing wrong with winning in the short term. The problem begins when short-term thinking becomes the strategy instead of the byproduct. Because what feels good now is not always what builds something meaningful later. Long-term thinking, on the other hand, rarely feels exciting in the moment, but it is the only thing that truly changes lives. The long game requires patience in a world addicted to speed. Everything around you pushes for faster results, quicker recognition, and instant rewards. Social media celebrates overnight success without showing the years of preparation. Headlines highlight outcomes without explaining the process. When you live in that environment, it becomes easy to confuse progress with visibility and movement with growth. But the long game is different. It asks you to make decisions today that may not pay off tomorrow, next month, or even next year, but will matter deeply 5 years from now. Every decision you make is a vote for a future version of yourself. The question is whether that future is intentional or accidental. When you play the long game, you stop asking, what will make me feel good right now, and start asking, what will make me proud later. That shift changes how you spend your time, how you manage your energy, and how you define success. It slows you down in the right ways and speeds you up where it counts. Short-term wins often come with hidden costs. They may demand compromises you don't notice until later. Burned relationships, weakened habits, eroded trust, or fragile confidence. Long-term thinking forces you to consider those costs up front. It makes you weigh consequences instead of impulses. And while that can feel restrictive, it is actually freeing, because when you understand what truly matters over time, many distractions lose their power. Playing the long game also reshapes how you handle setbacks. When your focus is short-term, every obstacle feels catastrophic. A delay feels like failure. A mistake feels like the end. But when you think in years instead of days, setbacks become data. They are part of the process, not a verdict on your ability. You stop panicking and start adjusting. You trade urgency for endurance. Long-term thinkers are not in a rush to prove themselves. They are in a commitment to build themselves. They understand that consistency over time beats intensity in bursts. Small habits repeated daily compound into extraordinary outcomes. One good decision rarely changes a life. Thousands of aligned decisions do. That is the quiet power of the long game. When you evaluate decisions through the lens of 5 years, clarity emerges. You begin to see which opportunities are aligned and which are simply loud. Not every opportunity is meant for you, even if it promises quick rewards. Some doors open fast and close even faster. Long-term thinking teaches you to say no to good options so you can say yes to the right ones. That discipline protects your future. The long game also demands humility. You must accept that real growth takes time and that you may not receive immediate recognition for your efforts. This is difficult in a culture that rewards visibility over substance. But those who commit to depth over display build foundations that don't collapse under pressure. They don't need to announce progress because progress eventually announces itself. Playing the long game changes how you invest in yourself. You stop chasing shortcuts and start building skills. You stop looking for hacks and start mastering fundamentals. You read when others scroll. You practice when others perform. You prepare when others react. And over time, that preparation creates an unfair advantage, not because it was secret, but because it required patience. Long-term thinking also shapes relationships. Instead of transactional interactions, you build trust. Instead of burning bridges for short-term gain, you strengthen connections that will matter years later. You treat people with respect not because it's strategic, but because you understand that reputation compounds just like habits. The way you make people feel today often determines the opportunities you receive tomorrow. When you play the long game, pressure loses some of its power. You are less reactive, less impulsive, and less swayed by comparison. You understand that someone else's timeline has nothing to do with yours. You don't rush your process just because someone else is louder or faster. You stay focused on your direction, not their speed. The long game requires faith. Not blind faith, but disciplined faith. Faith that effort applied consistently will produce results even if you can't see them yet. Faith that integrity matters even when it's not rewarded immediately. Faith that becoming better is more important than looking better. This kind of faith is built through action, not optimism. In 5 years, you will not remember most of the small wins that feel urgent today. You will remember the habits you built, the standards you kept, and the decisions that shaped your character. You will remember whether you chose comfort or growth, convenience or commitment. Those choices repeated become your life. So when you are faced with a decision in 2026, pause, step back from the emotion of the moment. Ask the one question that cuts through noise and temptation: will this still matter 5 years from now? Because if it does, it deserves your time, your energy, and your patience. And if it doesn't, no matter how good it feels today, it may not be worth the cost of your future. The world is moving faster than it ever has, and it will not slow down to make you comfortable. Technology evolves, industries shift, skills expire, and expectations change, often without warning. What worked yesterday may be irrelevant tomorrow. In this environment, standing still is the same as falling behind. This is why learning is no longer something you do when it's convenient. It's something you must do continuously, not to get ahead, but to stay relevant. For a long time, learning was treated as a phase. You studied, you graduated, and then you applied what you knew for the rest of your career. That model no longer works. Knowledge now has a shorter shelf life. Skills depreciate. Titles don't protect you. The only real security comes from your ability to adapt. And adaptation begins with curiosity, the willingness to ask questions, to explore, and to admit that what you know today may not be enough tomorrow. Curiosity used to be a nice trait. Today, it's a survival skill. Curious people notice change early. They sense shifts before they become crises. They ask why things work the way they do and what might happen if they stop working at all. This mindset keeps them flexible. While others cling to certainty, curious people stay open. And openness is what allows learning to happen at speed. Learning faster than the world changes doesn't mean cramming information or chasing every new trend. It means building the habit of learning consistently. Small amounts every day. Reading, listening, experimenting, reflecting. It's not about volume, it's about rhythm. When learning becomes part of your daily routine, change becomes less threatening. You are already in motion, already adjusting. Many people resist learning because it exposes gaps. It reminds them of what they don't know. But discomfort is not a sign of incompetence. It's a signal of growth. The moment you feel confused is often the moment you're learning something new. Those who avoid that feeling stagnate, those who lean into it evolve. Learning requires humility, and humility is a strength, not a weakness. The pace of change also demands unlearning. Some beliefs, habits, and methods that once served you may now be holding you back. Learning faster than the world changes means being willing to let go of outdated ideas. That's hard, especially when your identity is tied to past success. But adaptability requires flexibility. Growth often begins where certainty ends. When you commit to learning, you gain leverage. You become harder to replace because you are constantly improving. You don't panic when things change because change is familiar territory. You don't rely on credentials or history. You rely on capability. And capability grows through learning applied over time. Learning also sharpens your thinking. It helps you see connections others miss. It allows you to make better decisions because you understand context, not just outcomes. In a noisy world full of opinions, learners seek understanding. They don't just react, they analyze. They don't just repeat, they question. This depth of thinking becomes a competitive advantage in any field. Speed matters, But direction matters more. Learning faster doesn't mean learning everything. It means learning what matters. It means identifying the skills that align with your future, not your past. The world rewards those who prepare for what's coming, not those who perfect what's fading. Curiosity guides that preparation by pulling you toward relevance. Learning is also how you remain confident in uncertainty. When you trust your ability to learn, you don't fear the unknown as much. You know you can figure things out. That confidence is calm, not loud. It doesn't come from having all the answers, but from knowing how to find them. And that kind of confidence is resilient. The people who struggle most with change are not those with fewer resources, but those with fixed mindsets. They see learning as a threat instead of an opportunity. They protect their comfort instead of expanding their capacity. Over time, that protection becomes a prison. Learning breaks the walls, it keeps your options open. Learning faster than the world changes also impacts how you lead and interact with others. You become a better listener. You ask better questions. You stay curious about perspectives different from your own. This makes collaboration easier and conflict more productive. Because when you're learning, you're not defending, you're discovering. The future will belong to those who can learn, adapt, and apply faster than the pace of change. Not the smartest, not the most experienced, the most willing to be beginners again, willing to challenge assumptions, willing to invest in growth even when there is no immediate reward. Every day you choose to learn, you widen the gap between where you are and where you could be. That gap is opportunity. The world will keep changing. That's inevitable. The question is whether you will change with it or be left reacting to it. When curiosity becomes a habit and learning becomes a lifestyle, you don't just survive change, you shape it. Most people think saying yes is a sign of strength. It feels generous. It feels open. It feels like progress. But every yes has a cost, whether you acknowledge it or not. Time, energy, focus, these are finite resources. When you spend them in one place, they are no longer available somewhere else. This is why saying no is not an act of rejection. It is an act of protection. Protection of what matters most. The problem is not that people say yes too often. The problem is that they say yes without intention. They agree out of guilt, fear, or habit. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of missing out, fear of being misunderstood. Over time, those unintentional yeses accumulate, and suddenly your calendar is full, but your life feels empty. You are busy, but not aligned. Productive, but not fulfilled. Clarity changes that. When you are clear about what matters, saying no becomes easier. Not easy, but easier, because you are no longer choosing between people and tasks. You are choosing between priorities, and priorities require boundaries. Without boundaries, even the best intentions get diluted. You can't do everything well. You can only do a few things with excellence. Saying no creates the space for that excellence to exist. In 2026, the pressure to say yes will increase. More noise, more opportunities, more demands on your attention. The world will constantly ask for access to your time and energy. If you don't decide in advance what deserves a yes, everything will compete for it. And when everything feels urgent, nothing truly matters. Saying no is often misunderstood as selfish, but in reality, it is one of the most responsible decisions you can make. When you say yes to something you can't fully commit to, you don't just let yourself down, you let others down too. A distracted yes is more damaging than an honest no. Clarity builds trust. People may not like your boundaries, but they will respect your consistency. Every yes you give should support the life you are trying to build. If it doesn't, it's worth questioning. This doesn't mean you avoid responsibility or discomfort. It means you choose them intentionally. You decide where your effort has the greatest impact. You protect your focus so it can be applied deeply, not scattered thinly. Focus is fragile. It's easily broken and difficult to rebuild. When you say yes to too many things, your focus fractures. You start multitasking, rushing, and reacting instead of creating and leading. Saying no restores focus. It allows you to be fully present where you choose to be. And presence is where quality lives. Energy works the same way. Not all tasks cost the same amount of energy, and not all energy is physical. Emotional and mental energy matter just as much. Some yeses drain you long after the task is done. Others energize you because they align with your values. Learning to recognize the difference is part of maturity. Saying no to what drains you is how you preserve energy for what builds you. Time is the most unforgiving resource. You can earn more money, you can recover energy, you can rebuild focus. You cannot get time back. Every yes is a trade. The question is whether it's a trade you would make again if you were more honest with yourself. Saying no is how you honor the future version of yourself who will live with today's decisions. Clarity also simplifies decision making. When your standards are clear, you don't have to renegotiate every choice. You already know what fits and what doesn't. That reduces stress and decision fatigue. You stop feeling torn and start feeling grounded. This is not rigidity, it's alignment. Saying no doesn't require long explanations. It doesn't require justification or apology. A clear no delivered with respect is enough. Over-explaining often comes from insecurity, not kindness. When you are clear, your no becomes calm, and calm communicates confidence. The people who struggle most with saying no often confuse availability with value. They believe being needed makes them important. But importance doesn't come from being everywhere. It comes from being effective where you are. Impact requires selectivity. Leaders understand this. They know that saying no to many things is what allows them to say yes to the few things that truly matter. There will be moments in 2026 when saying no feels uncomfortable. When you worry about missing out, being judged, or disappointing someone you care about, those moments are tests of clarity. They ask you whether you are willing to protect your priorities or sacrifice them for approval. Every time you choose clarity, you strengthen your self-respect. Saying no is not about closing doors. It's about choosing which doors to walk through fully. It's about giving your best, not your leftovers. When you protect your time, energy, and focus, you don't just become more productive, you become more intention is what turns effort into meaning. Most people think leadership is about being in front, being heard, being followed. They associate leadership with authority, recognition, and control. But true leadership rarely begins in the spotlight. It begins in service. It begins the moment you stop asking, how do I win? And start asking, how do I help? Because leadership is not about elevating yourself, it's about elevating others. And impact always comes before influence. Serving before you lead requires a shift in mindset. It asks you to move from self-interest to collective responsibility, from proving your value to adding value. When your first instinct is to help, not to impress, people feel it. Service builds trust without demanding attention. It creates credibility quietly, and credibility is what gives influence its weight. Leaders who focus on winning often chase short-term victories. They look for applause, authority, or validation. But those things are fragile. They disappear when circumstances change. Leaders who focus on helping build something more durable. They invest in people, systems, and culture. Their success is measured not by how high they climb, but by how many others rise with them. Service requires humility. It asks you to listen before you speak, to understand before you direct, to learn before you teach. This is difficult in a world that rewards loud opinions and fast answers. But humility is not weakness. It is strength under control. It allows you to see what others miss. It opens the door to insight, collaboration, and trust. When you serve first, you earn the right to lead later. People don't follow titles. They follow those who have shown they care. Care is demonstrated through action, through showing up when it's inconvenient, through supporting others without keeping score, through doing the work that no one is watching. These moments don't make headlines, but they build loyalty. Serving before leading also changes how you define success. Instead of asking, what do I get? You ask, what do they need? That question reshapes decisions. It influences how you allocate resources, how you communicate, and how you handle conflict. When people feel supported, they give more of themselves. Performance improves not because of pressure, but because of purpose. Impact comes before influence because influence without impact is hollow. It may look impressive, but it lacks substance. Impact is created through meaningful contribution, through solving real problems, through making life better for someone else. When people experience your impact, influence follows naturally. You don't have to demand respect when your actions consistently earn it. Serving does not mean ignoring your own needs or avoiding leadership responsibility. It means aligning your ambition with contribution. It means understanding that your growth is connected to the growth of others. When the people around you succeed, the entire system becomes stronger. Leaders who serve understand that leadership is not a zero-sum game. Service also builds resilience. When challenges arise, people are more willing to endure difficulty alongside leaders who have earned their trust. They know the leader is not acting out of ego, but out of care. This shared commitment creates unity, and unity is powerful. It allows teams to navigate uncertainty without falling apart. In environments where service is absent, leadership becomes transactional. People do the minimum. They protect themselves, they comply, but they don't commit. Service changes that dynamic. It invites engagement, it creates ownership. People stop working for a leader and start working with them. Serving before leading requires patience. The results are not immediate. There is no instant reward. But service compounds. Each act of support builds a relationship. Each relationship strengthens your influence. Over time, this creates a network of trust that no position alone could ever provide. Service also sharpens your perspective. When you focus on helping others, you become more aware of their challenges, strengths, and potential. This awareness makes you a better decision maker. You design solutions that are practical, not theoretical. You lead with empathy, not assumption. And empathy is what turns leadership from command into connection. In 2026, people will be drawn to leaders who serve. In a world marked by uncertainty and self-interest, service will stand out. Those who ask how to help will become anchors. Their presence will create stability. Their actions will inspire confidence. And their influence will grow, not because they sought it, but because they earned it. Serving before you lead is not about lowering yourself. It's about lifting the standard. It's about choosing impact over image. When you commit to helping first, leadership becomes a byproduct, not a goal. And when leadership is rooted in service, its influence lasts far beyond any title or moment. This is the rule that quietly determines the outcome of every other rule. You can have goals, plans, and opportunities, but without self-trust, none of them last. Confidence does not come from applause, recognition, or approval. Those things are temporary. They rise and fall depending on who is watching. Real confidence is built in private. It comes from knowing that when you make a promise to yourself, you keep it. That knowledge becomes an internal anchor. It steadies you when motivation fades and doubt creeps in. Most people think confidence is something you're born with or something you gain after success. In reality, confidence is earned. It is the result of a relationship you build with yourself over time. Every promise you keep strengthens that relationship. Every promise you break damages it. And just like trust with others, self-trust is built slowly and lost quickly. The The danger is that many people break promises to themselves so often that they stop believing their own words. They say they'll start tomorrow, be consistent this time, follow through soon, and deep down they don't believe it. That quiet disbelief becomes self-doubt. Keeping your word to yourself is not about dramatic declarations or perfect discipline. It's about small, consistent commitments, showing up when it's inconvenient, finishing what you start, doing the thing you said you would do even when no one will notice, especially when no one will notice, because those moments are not about results, they're about identity. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. And reliability becomes confidence. Breaking promises to yourself has consequences that are easy to overlook. It doesn't just delay progress, it erodes self-respect. When you repeatedly ignore your own commitments, you teach yourself that your intentions don't matter. Over time, this creates internal friction. You want more for your life, but you don't trust yourself to deliver. That gap between desire and belief is where frustration lies, and no amount of external success can close it. Self-trust simplifies your life. When you trust yourself, decisions become clearer. You don't overthink or second-guess every move. You act with alignment because you believe in your ability to follow through. This doesn't mean you never fail. It means that when you do, you respond with honesty and adjustment instead of avoidance. You don't abandon yourself at the first sign of difficulty. Keeping promises to yourself also builds emotional resilience. Life will challenge you, plans will change, circumstances will test your patience. In those moments, self-trust becomes your safety net. You may not control the outcome, but you trust your effort, you trust your response. That trust allows you to stay grounded instead of reactive. The world is full of noise telling you who to be, what to want, and how to measure success. Applause can be intoxicating. It feels like proof, but applause fades. And when it does, you're left with yourself. If you haven't built trust there, the silence can feel overwhelming. But when you have, the silence becomes peaceful. You don't need constant validation because you already know who you are. In 2026, discipline will matter, but discipline rooted in punishment will not last. Discipline rooted in self-respect will. You keep your promises not because you're afraid of failure, but because you value your word. You don't need motivation to show up. You show up because that's who you are. Identity drives behavior far more powerfully than emotion ever will. Keeping your word to yourself also changes how others see you. People may not know the promises you make in private, but they feel the results. They see consistency. They see calm confidence. They see someone who doesn't overpromise and underdeliver. That external trust begins with internal trust. You can't consistently show up for others if you don't show up for yourself first. There will be days in 2026 when it would be easier to quit, easier to delay, easier to tell yourself it doesn't matter. Those are the days that matter most. Not because of what you accomplish, but because of what you reinforce. Each choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. Keep the promise, and you strengthen your future. Break it, and you make the next promise harder to keep. This is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. Set promises you can keep. Start small. Build momentum. Self-trust grows through evidence, not intention. One kept promise is stronger than 1,000 good plans. When no one is watching, when there is no applause, when there is no immediate reward, that is where confidence is built. In those quiet moments, you decide whether you are someone you can rely on. And in 2026, that decision will shape everything that follows. These are not rules for success. They are rules for meaning. And when you build meaning first, success has no choice but to follow.